a shower, for God's sake. As a matter of fact, that's just the question that every French editor, and I'm talking about 6, would use the story of that picture. And they've all pages. But that was the one abiding question they had. How did you take a picture like that? And well, I was 27, she was 39. So, but he was a friend of mine, so I wouldn't have been party to any
hanky-panky.
As a matter of fact, there's one issue of the New Yorker magazine, January 8th, 1908, or 2008. And they did 3 pages on that picture without running the picture. And they mentioned her derriere, and they said it's quite a derriere. And they mentioned the president of France, and the lady he was living with at the time and would eventually marry, who appeared in a Woody Allen movie as an art dealer on the street in Paris. And the writer was a New York staffer, but he got everything wrong in it, except, especially wrong, he made it appear that Nelson hired me to take her picture so that he, Nelson, had proof of his score with a French intellectual, which would be absolutely the furthest thing from Nelson's mind. Is one person, at least here, Bettina Drew would have her. And Adam Gopnik was the name of the writer.
Oh, yeah.
Anyway, I look forward to the time that my rejoinder on this contretemps will be published.
So do we.
Actually, Nelson called me and said, well, one of his calls that week was, can you get me a new shower? No, a new stove for $85. I said, well, I can shop on Milwaukee Avenue. Anyway, by the time I had located a stove, his romance with one of his tenants in a 3-story building he had bought for $16,000 with the money from Wildside. Anyway, his interest had flared, as they say. And but he called me up next week and he said, hey, we just got thrown out of the Division Street Y. I said, why'd you get thrown out? He said, well, because Madame is female and it's an all-male Y. So Division Street Y threw out Simone, and he said, can you borrow me a bathroom? So I knew a lot of young ladies at the time, models and so on. And I knew one young lady who had an apartment in the approximate neighborhood. And she left the key in under the mat. I picked up Simone on Levancia and took her to this house to take a shower. And Nelson warned me that she often left the door open in the bathroom for reasons of her own. And so she was pleasantly seductive in her palaver. Did I love my wife? Was she good in bed, etc. And but I don't think she was interested in me, and she was, very much interested in Nelson. So but when she left the door open, it was just a matter of, I always, in those days, I always carried a camera. And so she heard the click of my very quiet Leica, and she said, "Oh, you naughty man." But, I didn't pursue it after that, and I certainly would not have. And so I dropped her off, and that was it. I'm sorry to disappoint everyone. Especially myself.
Somebody back there, Dan?
Did you spend much time with Nelson at his cottage here in Miller Beach?
Well, at one point, I had my in-laws, who were nice, substantial people from New York, and we had 5 kids, and 4 separate weekends I was supposed to they had to cancel from making a trip here to New York. Some people in their late 60s, early 70s, and each time my wife had to tell them that I had a different job from Sports Illustrated, usually a football game. And the 5th job, I had to reluctantly tell Sports Illustrated that turning them down was like turning down Elizabeth Taylor. And was the New York Yankees for playing in their infield. And they sent a young photographer named Neil Leifer in, and he got a cover in 3 University of Texas football game. He got a cover and 3 color pages out of it, and that made his career. The bottom line on it was that Sports Illustrated recently paid $9.3 million for Neil Leifer's sports negative. And anyway, so that was.
So how did you miss out?
What?
You missed out going to see Simone and Nelson there together?
Yeah, I would have. Thanks for keeping me straight. I was due out here 3 or 4 of those weekends when Simone was here and Nelson and she were quarreling, and I always thought that I would have perhaps gotten a quintessential picture of their relationship better than the one up here. Especially if they were quarreling in the nude. But I never got to do it thanks to my in-laws and so on. Okay.
Didn't you have a relationship with Elizabeth Taylor?
With?
Elizabeth Taylor?
Oh yeah, I once slept with Elizabeth Taylor. But my wife, my late wife, 3.5 years now, when she would see me approaching the story, even in telling it, I would start my lectures at churches and synagogues. I would say, well, the perquisites of being a magazine photographer, especially for Life magazine, are many. You get to take pictures of presidents. You got to sleep with Elizabeth Taylor. Then my wife would be going like this, and I would ignore her. And, I said, well, wait till in the crowded woken up, as the English say, and waited for the question period. I would describe the following incident, which ultimately I used as a blog because the Chicagoist was doing the weekly blog for them. And they had 14 cities in the U.S., and they had Shanghai, Toronto, and London. So I was syndicated, and when the story Liz Taylor appeared in the London paper, got 81,000 hits. So I have an outfit now called Bureau of Arts and Culture. It's an LA cultural magazine on the net. And within the next couple of weeks or so, I think they're going to run a story on me, and I think that's one of the things they'll tell about. But the real story was that I was shooting Elizabeth Taylor for Life magazine. There's something here called Smell-O-Vision, which her husband, late husband, Mike Todd, had left her. This is characters appeared in a orange grove. You would get the smell of oranges, go piped up in the basement, fill the whole theater with oranges. And it was one of the most harebrained schemes. But Mike Todd had put $100,000 in it. And so Elizabeth was following school. One of Elizabeth's sons, or Mike Todd's sons. So 2 weeks later, when was that? 70? 60?
1960.
Yeah. So I did the Pictures for Life 60, and then 2 weeks later, I'm on an airplane in LA, about 8 in the morning, coming back from the shoot for Sports Illustrated, and all of a sudden, 2 fire trucks pulled alongside the plane as we were taking off. The plane stopped, and here comes Elizabeth Taylor in a fire truck, and I was sitting in the rear compartment. One empty seat was next to me, and she came in, and she was going to sit down there, and she said, "Hello, Art," and she said, "Would you pardon me if we don't talk? Let's just sleep together all the way to Chicago." So I deferred to her social instinct, and so she says, I just came back from a party, and I was out there all night, and so on. So I said, okay. And I sat down like that, my intellectual publication, and she sat next to me, and pretty soon she fell asleep on my shoulder. That's what I wrote about. And anyway, I've been bedeviled by I was always waiting for Richard Burton to come around and hit me.
Any other questions?
Good question.
Good answer.
Better answer.
Amongst the other women I never slept with.
All right, any questions? Well, Art, thank you so much.
Okay.
Move move into the other room and we'll continue on with Bettina Drew.
Wait, I'm
Oh, it'll be just a minute.